The night Amara Rowe was disowned did not begin with shouting. It began with candles, silver plates, expensive wine, and the kind of silence that only rich families knew how to weaponize. The Rowe family sat around a long dining table polished so brightly it reflected every stiff face around it. Their home stood on a hill above the city, proud and cold, just like the people who lived inside it. Amara sat near the end of the table in a simple cream dress, her fingers locked tightly in her lap. She knew the dinner was not really a dinner. It was a decision waiting to happen. Her father, Gideon Rowe, had invited Darius Kane, the son of one of his oldest business partners, and everyone in the room knew why. The message had been clear for months. Darius was wealthy, polished, connected, and useful. He was the kind of man the Rowes approved of. The problem was simple. Amara did not love him. Her heart had already chosen someone else. If you enjoy emotional stories filled with love, heartbreak, and powerful life-changing moments, please like, comment, and subscribe. And tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Your support means so much and helps bring more beautiful stories like this to life. Darius sat across from Amara in a navy suit that looked too sharp for comfort. He smiled often, but never with warmth. He smiled like a man who was used to winning things. Her mother, Celine, lifted her glass and said, "Tonight is special. Families grow stronger when they make wise choices." Lucan, Amara's older brother, smirked before taking a sip of wine. Amara already felt trapped. Her father turned his cold eyes toward her and said, "Darius has made his intentions clear. We have all discussed it. It is time for you to stop behaving like a child and accept the future being offered to you." Amara's throat tightened. She looked from one face to another, hoping to find one person willing to see her, not just arrange her. But no one moved. No one softened. Then Darius reached into his jacket and placed a small velvet box on the table. The room waited. He opened it slowly. Inside was a diamond ring so bright it almost felt cruel. Amara stared at the ring, then at Darius. "I can't accept that." The silence broke like glass. Her mother's fork dropped against her plate. Lucan leaned back with a laugh that held no humor. Gideon Rowe's voice lowered into something dangerous. "What did you say?" Amara inhaled carefully. "I said I can't accept it." Darius kept smiling, but his jaw hardened. "Perhaps you are surprised. I understand." "No," she said more firmly now. "I am not surprised. I just do not love you." Celine's face twisted in embarrassment. "Amara, enough." But Amara had already spent too many years being quiet. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought the whole room could hear it. "I will not marry a man just because it fits this family's plans." Gideon placed both hands on the table. "Then whose plans do you intend to follow?" "Yours." Amara swallowed. There was no safe way to say it, so she said it plainly. "I love someone else." The words changed the room completely. They did not only offend her family. They insulted their control. Gideon rose from his chair with slow, terrifying calm. "Say his name." Amara stood too, though her knees trembled. "Elian Voss." Lucan let out a harsh laugh. "The carpenter's son?" "He is an architect," Amara snapped. "An architect with no money," Celine replied. "A man from nowhere." "A man with dignity," Amara said. "A man beneath you," her father answered. The truth was that Elian Voss was not beneath anyone. He was simply not wealthy. He had grown up in a small apartment above his uncle's repair shop. He had studied by streetlight when the power failed. He had earned every opportunity with his own hands. Amara had met him 8 months earlier at a charity art event she had attended only to please her mother. While other men talked to her family name, Elian had spoken to her as if she were a real person. He had asked her what kind of life she wanted when no one was watching. No one had ever asked her that before. Their first conversation lasted 20 minutes. She thought about it for weeks. Their second conversation lasted 3 hours in a quiet cafe where no one recognized her. By the time rain tapped against the windows that night, she already knew she was falling in love. Elian had gentle eyes and steady hands. He listened without trying to fix every wound. He made ordinary things feel sacred. He once brought her a paper bag of roasted corn from a street cellar because she had confessed she preferred it to the tasteless luxury meals served at charity dinners. He once walked her through a half-finished building at sunset and told her, "Homes should make people feel safe, not small." She never forgot that. Around him, she did not feel like Gideon Rowe's daughter or Celine's disappointment or Lucan's weaker sibling. Around him, she felt like Amara. Just Amara. And that had become more precious than anything her family owned. Her father pointed at the door. If you choose that man over this family, then you leave this house with nothing. Celine's voice came sharp with fury. Do not test us. Amara looked at her mother, hoping for even a flicker of mercy, but there was only pride, hard and unbending. So that is it? She asked quietly. You would rather lose me than let me choose my own life? Lucan folded his arms. You are embarrassing all of us. Darius closed the ring box and stood. I will not stay to be insulted. No one stopped him. Gideon stepped closer to Amara. Listen to me carefully. If you walk out that door for Elian Voss, do not ever return asking for help, forgiveness, or your place in this family. You will no longer bear our name in any way that matters. The room blurred for a second, not because Amara was weak, but because pain came like a sudden wave. She had imagined resistance, anger, punishment. But hearing her family speak of cutting her away so easily still broke something inside her. Yet beneath the pain, another feeling rose. Clarity. Terrible, lonely clarity. She turned and walked upstairs before anyone could see the tears burning in her eyes. In her bedroom, she packed one suitcase with shaking hands. A few clothes. Her sketchbook. A framed picture of herself at 12, before she had learned how conditional family love could be. A novel Nyla once gave her. The silver necklace Elian had bought her from a market stall. Her mother entered without knocking. Think carefully, Celine said from the doorway. Amara did not turn. I am. You are throwing your life away for a fantasy. Amara zipped the suitcase. No. I am walking away from a cage. Celine's voice dropped. He cannot give you what this family can. Amara finally faced her. Maybe not, but he would never make me earn love by obedience. For a moment, Celine looked stunned, as if no one had ever spoken truth to her so plainly. Then her expression hardened again. Once you go, do not come back. Amara nodded, though it felt like swallowing glass. I understand. She carried the suitcase downstairs herself. No one helped. No one begged her to stay. Her father stood beside the fireplace like a judge reading a sentence. Lucan looked almost amused. She paused at the door, waiting for one voice to break, one heart to soften. None did. So she walked out into the night. Rain had started falling by then, thin and cold. The iron gates of the Rowe estate seemed taller than ever. Amara stepped onto the wet pavement in heels she could barely walk in, clutching her suitcase with one hand and her phone with the other. Her fingers were numb as she dialed Elian. He answered on the second ring. Amara. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. His tone changed instantly. Where are you? At the gate, she whispered. I'm coming. Those two words carried more comfort than her family had given her in years. Elian arrived 20 minutes later in his old dark sedan, the one with the stubborn door that only opened from the outside. He jumped out before the car fully stopped and ran to her in the rain. The moment he saw her face, he understood. He took the suitcase from her hand and then cupped her cheeks gently. They did it, he asked softly. She nodded once. His face tightened with pain, not surprise. Come with me. The warmth inside his car felt unreal. Amara sat in silence, shivering, while Elian drove through wet city streets glowing with blurred lights. After a few minutes, he reached across the console and took her hand. That small touch undid her. She began to cry, not neatly, not quietly, but with the deep, helpless grief of someone mourning people who were still alive. Elian pulled over near an empty overlook and simply held her while the rain struck the roof above them. I'm sorry, she whispered through tears. I chose you and lost everything. He pressed his forehead to hers. No, Amara. You chose yourself. I just happened to be standing beside the truth. That night, Elian brought her to Nyla Reed's apartment because his own place was too small and under renovation. Nyla opened the door in mismatched pajamas, took one look at Amara's face and said, Come in, no questions tonight. She made tea, found Amara a blanket, and pretended not to notice when Elian sat on the floor beside the couch and held Amara's hand until dawn. Around 3 a.m, when the city outside went quiet, Amara looked at him and asked the question that had been tearing at her. What if they were right? Elian's expression did not change. About what? About me ruining my life. He shook his head. A ruined life is one lived for other people's pride. Amara wanted to believe him. She truly did. But pain had a way of making fear sound wise. The next weeks were harder than love stories usually admit. Love did not erase hunger, job rejection, or the humiliation of starting from nothing. Amara's bank card linked to her family's accounts stopped working. Her phone plan was cut off. Her father's lawyer sent a formal notice that she had no financial claim to any family property or trust. Her surname, once a golden key, became a closed door. Some people in their social circle refused to speak to her. Others spoke to her with fake pity. Nyla helped her find temporary work at a small design studio, where Amara sorted fabrics, answered emails, and sketched ideas no one knew were brilliant. Elian worked longer hours at his firm and took extra freelance projects at night. They ate cheap noodles, shared bus fare when his car failed, and counted every bill twice. Yet in those difficult days, Amara also saw something she had never known in her family home: peace. One evening, after a long day, Elian took her to the roof of Nyla's apartment building with takeout in paper boxes. The city lights stretched around them like fallen stars. He apologized because dinner was simple. Amara laughed softly. "You keep apologizing for things my old world taught me to value," she said. He looked embarrassed. "I just wish I could give you more." She set her food down and turned fully toward him. "You gave me honesty. You gave me room to breathe. You came when I called. Do you know how rare that is?" He did not speak. He simply looked at her the way a person looks at something precious they are afraid to break. Then he reached into his coat pocket and brought out a tiny folded paper. "I know I cannot offer you grand things right now, but I wrote something." Amara unfolded it. It was a pencil sketch of a small house with wide windows, flowers under the porch, and two figures standing in the doorway. "What is this?" she asked. He smiled. "A place I want to build one day. A home that never uses love as leverage." Tears filled her eyes again, but these ones were softer. "You drew us." "I did." Then, under the open night sky, Elian kissed her. It was not rushed. It was not perfect. It was tender and trembling and full of the kind of promise only two wounded hearts can understand. For the first time since leaving her family, Amara felt hope rise stronger than grief. But hope is often most fragile just before the next storm. 3 months later, when Amara's life had just begun to steady, she received a message from an unknown number. "If you care about Elian, tell him to stop digging into row properties. Some doors should stay closed." Her blood ran cold. She stared at the words again and again. She had not known Elian was digging into anything. That night, when he came home late and exhausted, she showed him the message. His face changed in a way she had never seen before. "Elian," she whispered, "what is this?" He sat down slowly. "There are things I was trying to protect you from. By hiding them from me?" He rubbed a hand over his face. "I found irregularities in one of your father's development projects months ago. Unsafe materials, fake inspection approvals, families pushed out with illegal notices. I thought if I could gather enough proof, I could expose it." Amara stared at him. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because your family already took enough from you. I didn't want to drag you back into their darkness. And now they are threatening you." He met her eyes. "I can handle that." But the fear inside her had already awakened. The rows did not lose quietly. They destroyed what stood in their way. And for the first time since she left that mansion, Amara understood that choosing love had not only cost her comfort. It had started a war. The message stayed in Amara's mind like a wound that would not close. She read it in the morning while brushing her teeth, saw it again while standing in line for coffee, heard it in the silence before sleep. Elian tried to act normal, but she noticed things now. The way he checked behind them when they walked home. The way he stopped taking certain calls in front of her. The way his smile sometimes arrived a second too late. She wanted to trust his strength, but fear had already entered the room and pulled up a chair. 3 nights after the message appeared, Amara asked him again, "How far have you gone with this?" They were in Nyla's kitchen, the air smelling of burnt toast and late-hour worry. Elian leaned against the counter and said quietly, "Far enough that your father would want me silent." Amara's hand tightened around her cup. "Then stop." He looked at her with surprise, then pain. "You know I can't." "Yes, you can." "No, I can't," he said more firmly. People were forced out of their homes, Amara. Families trusted those buildings. If the foundations are weak. "I know what it means," she cut in. "I'm not defending them. I'm trying to keep you alive." Elian stepped closer. "And I am trying to do something right. It should have been a noble moment, and maybe it was. But love becomes complicated when justice and fear start pulling in opposite directions." Amara loved him for his courage. She hated that same courage for putting him in danger. That contradiction began eating at her little by little. Nyla, who could read emotions like weather, pulled her aside the next day and asked, "Are you scared he'll get hurt, Or scared you'll lose the first good thing you ever chose? Amara answered honestly. Both. At the design studio, Amara tried to focus on work. She had recently been given more responsibility after one of her fabric concepts impressed the owner, a sharp but kind woman named Mara Sloan. For the first time in her life, Amara was being valued for her ideas rather than her surname. It should have felt exciting. Instead, she found herself jumping whenever the door opened. She started saving copies of every strange text, every unknown missed call, every car that lingered too long outside the apartment. Elian told her she was overthinking. Then one evening he arrived with blood on his sleeve. Amara dropped her bag the second she saw him. What happened? It's nothing. It is not nothing. He winced as she rolled up the fabric. A cut ran along his forearm. Not deep, but violent enough to tell its own story. Someone bumped into me outside the train station, he said. Then another man grabbed the folder I was carrying. I held on. That's all. Her face turned white. The evidence? He nodded once. Gone. Amara took a step back as if the room had shifted beneath her. This is not a warning anymore. Elian's jaw tightened. No. Then it ends now. He was silent. She stared at him. Tell me it ends now. But he did not say it. And in his silence, Amara heard everything. He still meant to continue. The fight that followed was the ugliest they had ever had. It was not loud because they hated each other. It was loud because they were terrified. Amara asked why he thought he had the right to decide such a risk alone. Elian asked why she wanted him to pretend not to see wrongdoing. She said he was being reckless. He said she was letting fear speak for her family. That sentence hit too hard. Amara's eyes filled instantly. You think I am becoming them? His anger vanished at once. No, that is not what I meant. But you said it. I said fear changes people. She laughed bitterly. And you think I don't know that? He reached for her, but she moved away. Amara. No, she said. You do not get to drag me out of one burning house and then build another one with secrets. She left before he could answer. Amara spent that night at the studio, claiming a deadline no one had given her. She sat at her desk while the city dimmed outside and memories came in painful waves. Her father signing papers without blinking. Her mother choosing pride over tenderness. The sound of the mansion door closing behind her. She had spent her whole life around power used carelessly, and now the man she loved was walking straight into it with nothing but evidence and bravery. Bravery was beautiful in stories. In real life it bled. The next morning, Mara Sloan found her asleep over a sketch pad. Instead of scolding her, she placed breakfast on the desk and said, "Tell me who hurt you." Something in Mara's tone opened a door. Amara did not tell her everything, but enough. Enough for Mara to say, "You need to understand something. Powerful families survive because people think they are untouchable. They are not. But fighting them requires strategy, not only emotion." Then she handed Amara a business card. "My sister is an investigative lawyer. Speak to her before your architect lover gets himself buried under principles." That afternoon, Amara met the lawyer. Her name was Tessa Sloan, and she had the kind of quiet focus that made people lower their voices. Amara explained the threats, the missing documents, the development project, and her family's history. Tessa listened without interruption. Then she asked, "Do you trust Elian completely?" Amara hesitated, not because she did not love him, but because love and trust were not feeling the same shape that week. "I want to." Tessa nodded as if that answer mattered. "Then you need facts, not fear. Tell him to bring me everything he still has." That night, Amara returned to the apartment she and Elian had recently begun renting together. The place was small, with uneven floors and a window that whistled in the wind, but it was theirs. She found him asleep on the couch, exhausted, one arm over his eyes. The sight broke her anger at once. He looked older in sleep, more tired than proud. She sat on the floor beside him and whispered, "I still love you." His eyes opened slowly. "I still love you too," he said. For a moment, neither moved. Then Amara told him about Tessa. At first he resisted. He said bringing in a lawyer would widen the danger. Amara answered, "The danger is already here." He looked at her for a long time before finally nodding. It felt like the first honest step they had taken in days. Over the next 2 weeks, their lives moved under pressure. Elian gathered backups from a secure cloud account and old email trails. Tessa began building a case. Amara uncovered archived photographs from charity events and development launches where her father and Darius Kane appeared with inspectors later tied to false approvals. Nyla became their shield and comic relief both, showing up with food, sarcastic comments, and emergency plans. "If all of you keep looking this dramatic," she said one evening, "at least let me moisturize your stress faces." But danger did not wait politely while truth organized itself. One Friday evening, Amara left the studio late and found Lucan waiting outside in a black car. He stepped out with the same smugness he had worn at the dinner table months ago, but there was an edge to him now, a crack beneath the polish. "Get in," he said. "No." He glanced around the street. "Do not create a scene." She laughed. "That would be new for our family, wouldn't it?" His mouth tightened. "Father wants this handled quietly." Then he should have raised quieter monsters. Lucan moved closer. "You think this man loves you enough to survive what is coming?" Amara's body went cold. "Are you threatening him?" "I am warning you. Tell him to disappear. Tell Tessa Sloan to drop the matter. Or the next thing taken from you will not be a bank card." For one terrible second, Amara saw how deep the darkness in her family truly ran. Lucan was not bluffing. He had crossed beyond cruelty into something far uglier. She pulled out her phone and lifted it between them. "Say that again." His face changed instantly. He grabbed her wrist, but before things could worsen, a voice cut across the street. "Let her go." It was Elian. He strode toward them with a fury Amara had never seen in him. Lucan released her and stepped back, smoothing his jacket as if he had touched something filthy. "You should keep your girl on a shorter leash," Lucan muttered. Elian moved so fast Amara barely caught his arm in time. Lucan slipped into the car and drove away. The whole drive home, neither Amara nor Elian spoke. Once inside, she turned on him with shaking anger. "How did you know where I was?" He hesitated. Her stomach dropped. "You were following me? I was making sure you got home safely. You do not get to decide that without telling me. And you do not get to walk around after direct threats as if this is still a normal life." Their voices echoed off the narrow walls. Then, just as suddenly, the anger cracked open and grief rushed through. Amara sank onto the chair and covered her face. "I'm tired," she whispered. "I am so tired of being afraid." Elian knelt in front of her. "I know." "No, you don't," she said, tears slipping through her fingers. "Because you still believe courage guarantees meaning. My family can ruin people and sleep well after it. They do not care about truth. They care about winning." He took her hands gently. "Then let me say this clearly. I am not fighting because I think courage makes me invincible. I am fighting because I love you, and I cannot live knowing the people who broke you are still breaking others." Her tears came harder then. "And if I lose you?" His face softened into something devastatingly tender. "Then at least know this. Loving you has already changed my life more than safety ever could." She kissed him before she could stop herself, and the kiss tasted like fear, apology, and desperate need. They held each other that night like people trying to memorize warmth before winter. The case moved faster after that. Tessa found a former site engineer willing to testify anonymously. Mara connected Amara with a journalist she trusted. Financial records began pointing not only to Gideon Rowe, but to Darius Kane as a silent beneficiary in several shell companies. It was bigger than one corrupt building. It was a network, a machine fed by money and protected by silence. Every new fact made Amara feel both stronger and more fragile. She had wanted distance from her family. Instead, she had become part of the force that might bring them down. Then, 2 days before the journalist planned to publish, Elian vanished. He sent no message. He did not answer calls. His office said he had left early after receiving some kind of emergency notification. By midnight, Amara was shaking so badly Nyla had to hold the phone while she spoke to Tessa. By morning, there was still nothing. No trace. No word. At noon, a plain envelope slid under their apartment door. Inside was a single photograph. Elian was sitting in what looked like an empty warehouse, his face bruised, his hands tied behind a chair. On the back of the photo were 5 words written in neat black ink. "Choose wisely this time, Amara." Everything inside her stopped. The police were contacted, but Tessa warned that powerful men often moved faster than process. Amara stared at the photo until her vision blurred, then stood up with a calm that frightened even herself. Nyla said, "What are you thinking?" Amara answered, "My family wanted me weak. They taught me fear. They trained me to obey. Tonight they will learn what happens when the daughter they discarded stops begging for mercy." She picked up her coat, wiped her tears, and headed for the one place she swore she would never return. The Rowe Mansion. The mansion looked exactly as Amara remembered, and nothing like it at all. The stone walls still glowed under carefully placed lights. The fountain still poured water in graceful silence. The gates still opened with the same mechanical dignity that once made visitors feel honored. But to Amara, it now looked like a monument built over buried harm. She stepped out of the car Tessa had arranged for her, not as a lost daughter returning home, but as a woman walking into the center of a storm. Tessa had insisted on sending backup and keeping the police informed, but Amara knew this confrontation would begin before any sirens did. The front door opened before she knocked. Her mother stood there in silk and pearls, as immaculate as ever, though her face lost color the moment she saw her. "Amara," Celine whispered. "Where is he?" Celine tried to recover her poise. "I do not know what you mean." Amara walked past her into the house. "Do not insult me tonight." In the drawing room, Gideon stood by the fireplace exactly where he had stood the night he disowned her. Lucan leaned against the drinks cabinet. Darius Kane sat calmly on the sofa, as if this were an ordinary business discussion. The sight of all three together made the truth unmistakable. Her family had not simply tolerated evil. They had partnered with it. Gideon's tone was cold. "You came alone?" "No," Amara said. "For once, I came prepared." Lucan smirked. "You always did love dramatic entrances." Her eyes cut to him like glass. "And you always did mistake cruelty for intelligence." Darius crossed one leg over the other. "This does not need to become ugly." Amara laughed once, low and bitter. "Ugly happened when you had an innocent man taken." Her father's face hardened. "Be careful what accusations you make." "No," she replied. "You be careful what lies you choose. Because tonight I am done protecting your name." For a moment, no one spoke. The air itself felt sharpened. Then Gideon said, "If Elian Voss is in trouble, it is because he involved himself in matters beyond him." Amara stepped forward. "You mean illegal evictions? Fake safety approvals? Bribed inspectors? Families living in dangerous buildings while you hosted charity dinners and smiled for cameras?" Celine gripped the arm of her chair. Lucan's expression flickered. Darius remained still, but his eyes changed. That was enough. Amara knew then that Tessa had been right. Facts frightened them more than emotion ever could. Gideon looked at her with contempt. "You walked away from this family for a poor man and now returned speaking like a prosecutor. Have you learned nothing?" "Yes," Amara said. "I learned that wealth without conscience is rot dressed in gold." Lucan pushed away from the cabinet. "Do you really think you can win? You have no idea how the world works." Amara faced him fully. "No, Lucan. I finally do." She reached into her bag and placed a small recording device on the table between them. It was enough to make them all glance at it. The truth was that it was only one piece of protection. The Real files were already elsewhere. But the effect mattered. "Everything connected to your projects," she said, "has already been copied. Financial trails, witness statements, site reports, messages, names. If Elian is not safe within the hour, those files will move in ways you cannot stop." Celine rose unsteadily. "Amara, listen to yourself. This is your family." Amara turned to her mother, and there was no hatred in her voice now. That made it even more painful. "No. Family does not break your spirit and call it discipline. Family does not trade your heart for contracts. Family does not kidnap the man you love." Something passed across Celine's face then. Shame, perhaps. Too late, but real. Darius stood. "This has gone too far." Amara took a step toward him. "You were at that table the night they tried to sell my future. You smiled while they threatened me. Do not pretend to be cleaner than the room you sit in." His charm finally cracked. "You are emotional. And you are afraid," she answered. At that exact moment, Gideon's phone rang. Everyone looked at it. He checked the screen, and for the first time that night, his confidence faltered. He answered in clipped silence, listened for 10 seconds, then ended the call. Amara watched him carefully. "What happened?" Lucan asked. Gideon did not reply. Amara knew. Tessa had moved. The journalist had likely received the first release. Maybe the anonymous engineer had gone formal. Maybe officers were already tracing locations. The machine was beginning to shake. She moved closer to her father. "Where is Elian?" Gideon stared at her with a fury so pure it almost looked like grief. "You choose strangers over your own blood." Amara's eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. "No. I chose decency over people who only remember blood when they want obedience." Before he could answer, another sound cut through the room. Not a phone this time. Sirens. Distant first. Then closer. Lucan swore. Darius moved toward the window. Celine sat down heavily, as if her knees could no longer hold her. Gideon remained still, but the silence around him had changed. He was a man realizing that control was slipping, and he had never learned how to exist without it. Amara stepped back. Last chance. He looked at her with hatred. Then at last he spoke. Warehouse 17. River District. Everything after that moved quickly. Tessa, already waiting nearby with officers, acted on the location immediately. Amara wanted to go, but she was stopped at the doorway by Celine's trembling voice. Amara. She turned. Her mother looked smaller than she ever had before. I did love you. The words landed in the room with terrible weakness. Amara's face tightened. Maybe you did in the only way you knew how. But it was never the way I needed. Then she walked out. The river district smelled of rust, rain, and old machinery. By the time Amara arrived with Tessa and the police convoy, lights were already cutting through the dark around Warehouse 17. Officers moved with practiced urgency. The metal doors had been forced open. Amara's heart pounded so violently she thought she might collapse before seeing anything. Then, through the movement and flashing lights, she saw him. Elian. He was alive. Bruised, exhausted, unsteady, but alive. Amara ran to him before anyone could stop her. He caught her with tied-up pain still lingering in his body, and for a moment the world disappeared. She pressed her face into his chest and sobbed with relief. Elian held her as tightly as he could. I'm here, he whispered. I'm here. She pulled back just enough to touch his face carefully, as if making sure he was real. Did they hurt you badly? I'll heal. She closed her eyes. I thought I lost you. His forehead rested against hers. Not tonight. Tessa approached gently. We need statements. But not immediately. Her eyes softened. You both did enough for one night. Later, at the hospital, while Elian's cuts were cleaned and his wrists bandaged, Amara sat beside him in a plastic chair and watched dawn slowly lighten the window. Exhaustion settled over both of them, but so did something else. Survival. When the nurse left them alone, Elian turned his head toward her and said, I'm sorry. She almost smiled through her tears. For being kidnapped? For the secrets. For thinking I had to carry everything alone. Amara took his hand carefully. I'm sorry too. For trying to protect love by controlling it. He looked at her, tired but warm. That sounds like something your family taught you. It does, she admitted. And something you are unlearning. She nodded. Because of you. He squeezed her hand. Because of us. The scandal that followed spread fast. News outlets picked up the story before noon. Anonymous insiders became named witnesses. Families who had been pushed out of unsafe buildings came forward. Financial investigators widened the case. Darius Kane publicly denied involvement until documents tied his private accounts to shell companies funding the developments. Lucan tried to disappear for a week before being located for questioning. Gideon Rowe resigned from every visible position before charges formally reached him. Celine did not speak publicly at all. Amara did not celebrate. That surprised many people. They expected a dramatic daughter to stand before cameras and speak of justice with fire in her eyes. But Amara had lived too close to pain to turn truth into theater. She gave one careful statement beside Tessa and the affected families. She said, no name, wealth, or status should make harm untouchable. This is not about revenge. It is about accountability. Then she stepped away from the microphones and went home. Home. The word still felt new. Their apartment remained small. The window still whistled in the wind. The kitchen tap still needed a very specific twist or it leaked. Yet after everything, it felt almost sacred. Nyla filled the fridge, complained loudly that surviving scandal was no excuse for bad nutrition, and cried when she thought no one saw her. Mara Sloan promoted Amara after seeing the strength with which she handled public pressure. Tessa became not only their lawyer, but something like family by choice. For the first time, Amara's world was not built on appearance. It was built on truth, care, and earned trust. But heartbreak does not vanish just because justice arrives. Weeks later, Amara received a letter from Celine. Not a legal note. Not a polished statement. A handwritten letter. In it, her mother admitted things she had never been brave enough to say aloud. That she had married power and mistaken it for safety. That she had watched Gideon harden and learned to survive by becoming hard herself. That seeing Amara walk out that night had frightened her. Not because Amara was wrong, but because Amara had done what Celine never could. Choose love over fear. The letter ended with 6 words. I do not ask forgiveness. Only truth. Amara cried after reading it, not because the pain vanished, but because pain finally had a name. Some wounds do not close through reunion. Some close through understanding. She wrote back only once. I hope you learn how to live honestly. I am learning too. Months passed. Spring came gently to the city. The case continued through courts and headlines, but life outside scandal began to bloom again. One Sunday afternoon, Elian asked Amara to meet him at the half-finished building where they had once watched sunset through open concrete frames. She arrived wearing a soft blue dress and found him waiting with that same nervous steadiness he always had when something mattered deeply. What is this? She asked. He smiled. Come see. He led her through the building and up a temporary stairway to the top level. There, where empty space once stood, he had pinned new architectural drawings along a wall. They showed a community housing project, safe, beautiful, affordable, filled with light. Amara stared. Elian. He rubbed the back of his neck. Tessa connected me with a non-profit developer. Mara wants your design studio to collaborate. We can build homes for families displaced by projects like the ones your father destroyed. Amara covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. You once asked what comes after heartbreak, he said softly. I think maybe this. We make something kinder. She turned to him fully. You still believe in that after everything? I believe in it more. The wind moved gently through the open floor. The city stretched around them, bruised and beautiful. Elian reached into his pocket, and Amara laughed through tears at the familiar motion. Before you panic, he said quickly, this is not a grand diamond from a family arrangement. He opened a small box. Inside was a simple ring, elegant and warm, set with a modest stone that caught sunlight without demanding it. I cannot promise you a life without pain, he said. I cannot promise that fear will never visit us again. But I can promise you honesty, partnership, and a home where love is never conditional. Amara, just Amara, if you prefer. Will you marry me? She was crying too hard to answer at first. Elian laughed nervously. That is not helping my confidence. She stepped closer, cupped his face in both hands, and said, Yes. Yes, I will. When he slid the ring onto her finger, it felt nothing like the ring Darius once placed on a polished dinner table. This one was not an offer of control. It was an invitation to build. They kissed as the sun lowered over the city, and for the first time in a long time, Amara did not feel torn between the life she had lost and the one ahead. The old life had been a performance. This one was real. On their wedding day, Nyla cried before anyone else and then denied it. Mara brought flowers that looked too beautiful to be real. Tessa stood in the front row with the small, rare smile of a woman who trusted outcomes only after seeing them survive. There was no mansion, no business alliance, no gold script guest list designed to impress strangers. There was only a garden, soft music, honest vows, and two people who had walked through fear and chosen tenderness anyway. When Amara looked at Elian across the aisle, she remembered the rain-soaked night he had come for her outside the gates and said, I'm coming. In many ways, he had been coming toward her ever since. And if anyone had asked Amara then whether the night her family disowned her had ruined her life, she would have smiled through tears and said no. It broke her heart, yes. It stripped away illusion. It exposed cruelty. It left wounds that would ache in quiet moments. But it also led her to truth, to courage, to chosen family, and to a love that never asked her to earn her place. Sometimes the darkest night is not the end of a life. Sometimes it is the door that opens when every false home closes. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from.